I am tired of running for shade. And aren't you tired of being hustled and played? And aren't we all tired of crying about how hard it is to be black in America, even if it looks like we've got it made?
Has this been difficult for you?
Yeah. Because when you watch someone who you know and love, go through what he's going through.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner, dead at the age of 54 on a drowning accident while he was vacationing with his family in Costa Rica.
And if for some reason you can't find a reason to smile, then that's probably the best time to be the reason for somebody else to smile.
You ever hear a story that just doesn't sit right? Like, your brain says tragic accident, but your gut says something's off? That's exactly how people are reacting to the sudden death of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. According to reports, he drowned while swimming off the coast of Costa Rica during a family vacation. Just a regular day at the beach, then suddenly gone. No lead up, no health issues, no red flags. Come on, that's not just shocking, it's eerie. Especially when you realize this wasn't some reckless tourist diving into dangerous waters. This was Malcolm, a guy who kept his life tight, his circle small, and his business quiet. And now, with barely a ripple of warning, we're being told it was just a current that took him out. And can we talk about the pattern here? Black public figures who speak out, stand tall, challenge norms, and then disappear in these accidents. The timing feels more like a script than reality. Especially when you layer in the fact that Malcolm had just dropped a podcast, one of his most personal ever, just 48 hours before the incident. That's not just a coincidence, it's a red flag with a siren. And the worst part? The media is treating it like it's open and shut. No deeper investigation, no follow-up, just a few headlines and then silence. Like we're supposed to accept this and move on. But if you followed Malcolm's life, not just Theo from the Cosby Show, but the man behind the legacy, then you know this wasn't just some actor. This was someone who had grown into a quiet force, a cultural voice, a storyteller with purpose. And losing him this way, without questions or context, feels less like tragedy and more like erasure. So no, this doesn't add up. And pretending it does might be the biggest red flag of all. You know when someone says something that feels too perfect, too final, and you only realize it after they're gone? That's exactly what's happening with Malcolm-Jamal Warner's last podcast episode. It aired just 2 days before his death. Just 2. And it wasn't just him casually chatting or promoting a project. No, this episode felt like something else entirely. A goodbye dressed up as a conversation. And now, people are listening back, piecing together what they missed the first time. Because when someone says, if you can't find a reason to smile, be the reason someone else does, that's not just a motivational quote. That sounds like a man making peace with his time here. And can we be honest? It's giving the kind of emotional foreshadowing that you can't fake. That episode wasn't light or fluffy. It was raw, honest, even haunting. He talked about survival. He talked about identity. He even quoted poetry, deep lines about trauma, captivity, and cultural erasure. It was like he knew something, like he was leaving us breadcrumbs because he didn't think he'd have time to say goodbye later. And if that doesn't make your stomach twist, you're not paying attention. What really hit people hard was how Warner broke down the title of his podcast, Not All Hood. At first glance, it sounds like distancing from blackness, but he flipped it. He explained how the media sells a flattened version of black identity. That hood has been reduced to a trope, a branding tool. He wasn't rejecting it. He was reclaiming it, unpacking it, dismantling the way Hollywood commodifies black struggle while ignoring black nuance. That's not just brave. That's risky, because once you start talking like that, truthfully, unapologetically, the system listens, and not in a supportive way. Symbolically, it felt like Warner was peeling back layers of himself and asking his audience to do the same. He wasn't just talking about where he came from. He was interrogating the entire machine that decides what parts of us get celebrated and what parts get cut. And the more you listen, the more it feels like that episode wasn't just a message. It was a warning, a flashlight in a dark tunnel, right before it got snuffed out. So, when you pair that podcast with what happened 2 days later, you can't help but ask, was he trying to tell us something? Were those his final words, disguised as a podcast outro? Because if they were, we failed him. We didn't hear it in time. Or maybe we just weren't ready to. Let's get one thing straight. Malcolm-Jamal Warner wasn't Theo. But for decades, that's who people saw. The goofy, sweet son from the Cosby Show. The one who messed up his homework, but had a heart of gold. And sure, that character helped shift how black families were seen on TV, but it also boxed him in. You know what it's like to be frozen in time? To have a world call you by a name you outgrew years ago? That's emotional shrinkage. It's like trying to stretch in a space designed to keep you small. Warner spent most of his adult life quietly pulling himself out of that character shadow. He didn't rebel or spiral like some child stars. He evolved. He created music, poetry, and films. And the more you watched him work, the more you saw the man behind the myth. He was thoughtful, introspective, focused on legacy, not likes. But that didn't stop the media from hitting him with the same old "where are they now?" energy, like he hadn't been right in front of us the whole time, building something bigger than a sitcom. And that's the deeper story. The emotional labor of constantly having to prove you're more than the role you played as a teen. Malcolm wasn't clinging to fame. He was challenging the idea that fame was the goal in the first place. Fame makes you visible, but it doesn't make you whole. He wanted truth, not just attention. And he used his platform to explore what it means to be black, to survive, and to stay soft in a world that rewards hardness. What Theo represented in the 80s was hope. What Malcolm represented later was endurance. That's the arc, from symbol to substance, from scripted sun to cultural mirror. And when people finally started paying attention, it was right before we lost him. Typical, right? We wait until the voice is gone to realize how loud it was. This one's complicated, like really complicated, because when Bill Cosby fell, he didn't just fall alone, he took a whole legacy with him. And for Malcolm-Jamal Warner, that was personal. Cosby was more than a boss. He was a mentor, a guide, a second father. He cast Warner at 13, taught him about discipline, craft, and how to keep your cool in Hollywood. But then came the allegations, the headlines, the silence. And Warner? He was stuck in the middle of the biggest cultural reckoning of his life. And here's the thing, he didn't pick a side. Because how do you pick between the man who helped raise you and the women saying he destroyed them? That's not just a PR crisis. That's emotional war. Warner said it best. It's painful to hear any woman talk about assault, but it's also painful to watch my friend go through this. That's not a dodge. That's the sound of someone walking a tightrope with fire on both sides. He never defended Cosby, but he also didn't destroy him. Instead, he turned inward. He asked hard questions about art, legacy, and whether something good can still exist if the creator turns out to be harmful. That's not just philosophical. That's survival. Because Warner's whole career was tied to The Cosby Show. His face, his name, his royalty checks, all connected to that image. So when it came crashing down, he didn't just lose a mentor. He lost a piece of himself. And yet, even through all that, he stayed graceful, calm, quietly processing it all while the world screamed for statements. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's emotional maturity in a world built on snap judgments. And it showed us something deeper, that sometimes being silent isn't about protecting someone else. It's about protecting yourself while you try to figure out what you still believe. But before Cosby's fall, Malcolm faced a different kind of loss, the one that hits quiet and stays forever. Her name was Michelle Thomas. You probably remember her as Justine on The Cosby Show, Theo's on-screen girlfriend. But off-screen, she was more than that. She was his real-life love. And in 1998, she was gone. Just 30 years old. A rare, aggressive cancer took her fast. Too fast. And here's what makes it even more heartbreaking. Warner was by her side when she died. No cameras. No public meltdown. Just quiet, loyal presence. That tells you everything about the kind of man he was. Some people scream their grief. Malcolm sat in it, carried it, and it shaped him. This wasn't the kind of Hollywood tragedy that turns into tabloid gold. This was real, raw, devastating, and it never left him. You can hear it in the way he talks about relationships, in the caution in his voice, in the care he took with his words. That loss rewired him. And maybe that's why his later work had so much weight. Why his poetry cut deeper. Why his eyes looked older than his age. Grief is like that. It leaves fingerprints on your soul. And even though he moved forward, he never moved on. That loss taught him that love is fragile. That even when you do everything right, you can still lose everything. And that lesson? It made him more human than any role ever could. Here's where things get spine-chilling. Malcolm's final podcast episode, it wasn't just another creative drop. It felt like a confession. A coded one. He wasn't talking like a man on vacation. He was talking like a man on the edge of something big or the end of something bigger. You ever hear someone say so much without saying it directly? That's exactly what it felt like. Like he was dancing around a truth he couldn't say out loud. He spoke in metaphors about letting go, about unplugging from the machine, and finding peace in stillness. Sounds poetic, right? But when someone says they're stepping away to reclaim their spirit, and they end up dead days later, you start listening with new ears. And can we talk about the tone of his voice? It wasn't tired. It wasn't relaxed. It was heavy, like he was carrying something he couldn't drop until it was too late. And maybe, just maybe, that podcast was a drop. It's almost like he was slipping breadcrumbs to whoever could catch them. There's one part where he says, sometimes the only way out is to disappear before they make you vanish. Excuse me? Who's they? And what does make you vanish even mean unless you've seen it happen before? This wasn't just a spiritual guy talking about peace. This was a man talking from inside the storm, like he was trying to say goodbye without making it sound like one. And that's what hits the hardest. Because now that he's gone, that podcast feels like a locked diary, full of clues, full of warnings, and no one's asking the right questions. Because if they did, they might not like the answers. Sometimes, a final message isn't closure. It's a trapdoor opening beneath the truth, and we're all standing on it. Ever notice how some deaths feel like reruns? Not because we've seen them before, but because they follow the same eerie script. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death wasn't the first time a beloved black celebrity vanished under suspiciously natural circumstances. And sadly, unless we start connecting the dots, it won't be the last. Take a step back. Look at the bigger picture. First, it's a sudden accident. Then a vague cause. Then silence. It happened with Bobby Christina. It happened with Michael K. Williams. And now, it's happening with Malcolm. Different details, same conclusion. The same cycle of shock, media fluff, and then the quick sweep under the rug. It's almost like the public's being trained to move on before they can question it. And here's the psychological trick. Once a person's gone, their narrative is up for grabs. The louder you were in life, the quieter your story becomes after death, especially if your truth disrupted the mainstream. It's like a cultural muting switch. You start talking about healing, boom, tragic accident. You start questioning the system, boom, unexpected illness. You call out Hollywood or speak on mental freedom. Suddenly you're too quiet. That's not paranoia. That's a pattern. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Pop culture's full of tribute posts and tearful montages. But underneath that glossy sadness, there's a brutal irony. The same machine that ignores your voice in life will frame it in death. They'll say he was loved, but they won't say why he was fighting. They'll say he'll be missed, but never mention what he was warning us about. That's erasure dressed as remembrance. If there's a lesson here, it's this: silence isn't always natural. Sometimes it's manufactured. And if you don't recognize the pattern, you're already part of it. Here's the real question no one's asking. What happens when a black man starts speaking too loudly, too freely, too truthfully in a system built to mute him? Because Malcolm wasn't just making art. He was making statements. And the moment he stopped performing and started questioning, something shifted. There's a subtle violence in how public figures are handled. At first, they're loved, safe, familiar. But the second they become too self-aware, too reflective, too real, the love turns cold. Not instantly, but slowly. The invites dry up, the spotlight dims, and then they're gone. Spiritually at first, then literally. It's like a slow cancellation of their existence. And don't pretend we haven't seen it before. Look at Dave Chappelle when he walked away from his show. Or Lauryn Hill when she spoke about spiritual warfare in the industry. The moment they stepped out of character and into consciousness, the media machine turned them into punchlines. Why? Because a black voice that thinks for itself is always more dangerous than one that just entertains. Malcolm was entering that territory. He wasn't trying to be liked. He was trying to be heard. And that scares people. Because when a man like that starts pulling back the curtain, not with anger, but with clarity, it disrupts the whole performance. It breaks the illusion. It reminds us that fame isn't freedom. It's often a cage with velvet walls. So maybe the tragedy isn't just that Malcolm is gone. Maybe it's that we didn't listen until he was. And the worst part? If we keep ignoring these voices until they're gone, we're not just complicit. We're lost in the same illusion they were trying to break. Because in the end, the question isn't, how did he die? It's, why didn't we hear him while he was alive?